Gerald Mercer gave him 10 seconds. That was the part nobody believed afterward. By then, Keanu Reeves was 29 years old, and on a bright morning in a Toronto casting office, sunlight coming clean through the tall windows, Gerald Mercer held a single sheet of paper between two fingers and laughed at it. Him? I cut this guy in 10 seconds, years ago. No instrument, nothing there. He set the page down on the glass table and slid it back toward the producer across from him. Some people read for the camera, and the camera just looks right past them. That was him, believe me. I have an eye for this. It's the one thing I've never been wrong about. The producer, a woman named Robin Caldwell, didn't say anything. She looked at the page, then at the door to the waiting room, then back at Gerald. There was something careful in the way she was sitting now. The way a person sits when they know something the other person doesn't and hasn't decided yet whether to say it. Because the man Gerald Mercer had just dismissed, Keanu Reeves, was sitting in the next room. And the film, the one Gerald had spent 14 months trying to claw his way back into relevance with, did not move forward without him. There is a kind of mistake that doesn't come from a lack of information. It comes from being too certain you've already seen everything a person is in the first 10 seconds before they've even finished saying their own name. Hold on to that. It matters later. But let me take you back 14 years to when Keanu Reeves was 15 and tell you how a kid nobody expected anything from spent years building something in a room no one ever looked into. The Danforth Playhouse sat on a side street east of the river in Toronto, a brick building from 1924 that had been a vaudeville house, then a movie theater, then a furniture warehouse, and finally, by the early 1980s, a community theater held together by volunteer labor and the stubbornness of people who could not let the place die. It had 212 seats, a stage that sloped slightly to the left, and a back alley where, twice a month, the old props and the dead scripts and the recorded rehearsal tapes went out to the curb in black bins. To most people on that street, the bins were garbage. To 15-year-old Keanu Reeves, with nowhere else to be on a Tuesday afternoon, they were the most interesting thing in the city. At 15, Keanu was tall for his age, and getting taller in the awkward way that makes a teenager unsure of where his own hands are. He had thick, dark hair that fell into his eyes and a habit of standing very still, watching, the way some kids do when they have learned that the world is a thing that happens to you faster than you can keep up with. School had not gone well for Keanu, not because he wasn't bright, because the words on the page would not hold still. He would look at a line of text, and the letters would slide, swap places, dissolve into a gray hum that the other kids did not seem to experience. Reading aloud in class was a particular kind of torture, the sentence breaking apart in his mouth while 30 faces waited. He had been moved between schools more than once. A teacher had sat his mother down and told her, kindly, in the soft voice people use when they are delivering a verdict they think is mercy, that she should adjust her expectations. That some kids were just not built for the academic path, that it would be better for everyone if she made peace with that now. Keanu's mother, Patricia, worked long hours. At 45, she came home tired in the particular way that does not lift with a night's sleep, the tiredness of a person carrying a weight that has no bottom. She loved her son. She also lay awake some nights doing the math of his future and not liking the numbers. So 15-year-old Keanu walked. After school, on weekends, he walked the city, and one of the places his walking took him was the alley behind the Danforth Playhouse. The first time Keanu looked in the bin, he found a script. The cover was gone, the staples rusted, the pages soft from rain. Someone had penciled blocking notes in the margins, little arrows and abbreviations. X to Chessar, hold, beat. He stood there in the alley and turned the pages and felt something he did not have a word for yet. Somebody had used this. Somebody had stood on that sloped stage and become someone else with these exact pages in their hands, and now it was in a bin waiting, the truck. He couldn't stand it. He didn't fully understand why. He just couldn't stand the waste. He took it home. The next week, Keanu came back, and the week after that. He learned the rhythm of the bins, when they went out, what they held. Old scripts, mostly, but also, increasingly, something better. The playhouse had an ancient VHS camera that a board member had donated, and the stage manager taped rehearsals on it so the director could review blocking. When the tapes filled up or the show closed, they went in the bin too, half-hour cassettes, hour cassettes, labeled in marker with show titles and dates. Hamlet rehearsal, Act 3, Glass Menagerie, run-through, Our Town, Tech. To the playhouse, used tape was used tape. To 15-year-old Keanu, it was 100 hours of people learning to act, recorded, and thrown away. One Tuesday, Keanu was leaning into the bin, working a stack of cassettes loose from under a broken flat, when a voice behind him said, "You planning to pay for those?" He turned around fast, the way you turn when you've been caught. The man in the alley doorway was old. 80, it would turn out. White hair, a forest green cardigan with the elbows worn through, a push broom in one hand. He had a face that had been handsome a long time ago, and had aged into something better than handsome, something lined and specific and alert. His eyes were doing what Keanu's eyes did. Watching. "They're throwing them out," Keanu said. "I know what they're doing with them. I asked if you were going to pay for them." Keanu didn't know what to say. The old man looked at him for a moment longer, and then something at the corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "Relax. It's a joke. Nobody paying for garbage." He came down the 2 steps into the alley, set the broom against the wall, and looked into the bin himself. "What do you want them for?" "I watch them." "You watch them." The old man pulled out one of the cassettes, read the label, put it back. "Why?" Keanu thought about it. He was not, at 15, a kid who gave fast answers. He gave true ones, which take longer. "Because I want to learn how they do it," he said. "The actors. I keep watching the part where they stop being a person reading words and start being somebody. I want to know where that happens. I keep rewinding it." The old man went still. It was a small thing, that stillness. Keanu almost didn't notice it, but something had landed. "What's your name?" Keanu told him. "I'm Walter," the old man said. "Walter Holloway. I sweep this place and I lock it up at night, and they let me sleep in the green room when it gets cold, which, at my age, is most of the time." He picked the broom back up. "You want to learn how they do it? All right. Come inside. I'll show you something better than a bin full of tape." Now, you should know something about Walter Holloway, because 15-year-old Keanu did not know it yet, and it matters. 40 years earlier, Walter Holloway had been a name. Not a famous name, not the kind of name that survives, but a real one, a working one. He had done seasons at the Stratford Festival. He had toured. He had played the kind of roles that get a young actor noticed, and for about a decade, he had been on the edge of becoming something. And then the parts had thinned, the way they do, and the phone had rung less, the way it does, and somewhere in his 50s, Walter Holloway had become a man the industry had simply stopped seeing. Not rejected, worse than rejected, forgotten, filed under no longer relevant and never opened again. He had ended up here at 80, sweeping a stage he was once good enough to stand on. And he had made a kind of peace with it. The peace you make when the alternative is to be eaten alive by what might have been. But Walter had not forgotten what he knew. That was the thing about him. The industry had thrown away the man. It had not been able to throw away what was inside him. He carried it around the way you carry a language you have no one left to speak it with. And now there was a 15-year-old kid in the alley who wanted to know where a person stops reading words and starts being somebody. Walter took Keanu inside. The theater was dark and smelled of dust and old velvet and the particular cold of a brick building in the off-season. Walter turned on a single work light over the stage, a bare bulb in a metal cage, and it threw a hard circle of light onto the worn boards. "Read me something," Walter said. He pulled a script off a shelf in the wings, thumbed it open, and handed it over. "Page 40. The speech in the middle. Just read it." Keanu looked at the page, and the page did what it always did. The letters began their slow slide. He felt the old panic rise, the heat in his face, the certainty that he was about to fail in front of someone for the 10,000th time. He started reading. It came out broken. He stumbled on a word, went back, lost his place, stumbled again. His voice got smaller. He could feel the speech coming apart in his hands like the wet script in the bin. He stopped. He couldn't look up. "I can't read it right," Keanu said. I never could. The letters, they move. I know that sounds stupid. There was a silence. He waited for it, the soft voice, the kind voice, the adjust your expectations voice. He had heard it from teachers and counselors and once from a man at a job site who'd watched him struggle with a delivery form. He braced for it. It didn't come. Put the script down, Walter said. Keanu put it down. Now tell me what the speech was about. Not the words. What was happening to the man saying it? Keanu frowned. He'd only gotten through part of it, in pieces, but the pieces had stayed with him, the way they always did. He never could read a thing, but he could feel a thing. He's trying to convince his brother of something. But that's not really it. Keanu was quiet for a second. He's trying to convince himself. He already knows he's going to do the thing. He's just saying it out loud so it'll feel less like a betrayal when he does it. The brother's just the excuse to say it. Walter Holloway looked at the 15-year-old for a long moment. Then he sat down on the edge of the stage, slowly, the way a man with 80-year-old knees sits down, and he let out a breath that seemed to carry a great deal with it. In 30 years of teaching young actors, Walter said, the ones who could read beautifully, the ones who could pick up a page cold and make it sing, do you know how many of them understood that? That the speech isn't about the brother. Maybe 1 in 20. The rest are too busy being impressive to notice what's actually happening. He shook his head. You can't read the page. So what? The camera doesn't read your lines, son. The camera reads what you're hiding. And you already know how to see what a man is hiding. That's the part that can't be taught. The rest is just work. Keanu stood in the circle of work light and did not say anything, because there was a thing happening in his chest that he did not have a way to say. Somebody had looked at him for longer than 10 seconds. That night, Walter gave Keanu the notebook. It was a small thing, bound in cloth that had once been dark green and was now the color of an old chalkboard, the corners soft with handling. Inside, in a younger Walter's careful hand, were 40 years of notes, how to break a speech into beats, how to find the one true thing in a scene and play everything off it, how to memorize a part when the page fights you, which Walter had learned to help a dyslexic actor with decades before anyone had a name for it. There were diagrams. There were arguments with himself in the margins. And on the first page, underlined twice, in ink gone brown with age. The camera doesn't read your lines. It reads what you're hiding. 15-year-old Keanu read that notebook until the cloth cover came loose from the spine. Here is what the dyslexia actually meant for Keanu, day to day, because people who don't have it imagine it as just slow reading, and it is not that. It meant that the printed word was a locked door. It meant that every script, every form, every page of homework was a wall he had to climb instead of a path he could walk. The world had decided, very early, that a boy who could not climb that wall quickly was a boy of limited use. The world had a name for him, and the name was slow. But Walter had shown him something the world had missed. The locked door had forced Keanu, his whole life, to learn everything another way. He couldn't take in a character through his eyes, so he took it in through his ears, his body, his gut. He couldn't read what a person was supposed to be feeling off a page, so he had spent 15 years reading what people were actually feeling off their faces, because that was the only text that had never lied to him. The thing the world had called a deficit had been training him, in secret, for the one job where reading the hidden thing is everything. He just hadn't known it was a job yet. At 15, now he did. Keanu started going to the playhouse almost every day. Walter put him to work, sweeping in exchange for lessons, which is to say Walter let him pretend the sweeping was the deal so Keanu wouldn't feel like he was taking charity. Because Walter understood pride, having had so much of his own ground down over the years. In the empty afternoons, with the work light burning over the sloped stage, the old forgotten actor taught the 15-year-old nobody expected anything from. The lessons were not what Keanu expected. He had thought acting would be about pretending, about putting on a face. Walter spent the first month teaching him the opposite. "Stop showing me sad," Walter said one afternoon, watching Keanu strain through a speech, his young face working hard to demonstrate grief. "I don't believe a second of it. You're showing me a picture of sad." Real people don't show you they're sad. They hide it. They cover it. They make a joke. They look at the floor. They talk about something else, and the sad leaks out the edges anyway, in the thing they're not saying. That's what the camera wants. Not the picture. The leak. He made Keanu do the speech again, this time forbidden from showing anything at all. Just say the words and try to hide what the man is feeling. And Keanu did, and something true came up through the cracks of the hiding, and Walter nodded once and said, "There. You feel the difference? You weren't acting sad that time. You were a man trying not to be sad and failing a little. That's a person." The first one was a billboard. Walter taught Keanu about beats, the small units a scene breaks into, each one a single intention. He taught him that an actor who plays the whole scenes as one mood is boring, but an actor who finds the 7 small shifts inside it, the moments where the character changes tactics, gives up, tries again, lands on something, that actor is alive. He had Keanu mark the beats in the margins of the wet, rescued scripts, little vertical lines in pencil, and then play each beat as its own complete thing. And he taught him the memory technique, the one that would matter more to 15-year-old Keanu than to any student Walter had ever had. Because Keanu could not take the words in through his eyes, Walter taught him to take them in through everything else. "You don't read the line," Walter said. "You hear it. I'll say it to you. You say it back. We do it until it lives in your mouth and not on the page. Then we attach it. Every line gets a feeling and a movement. You cross to the window on this line. You pick up the cup on that one. Your body learns the part even when your eyes can't. By opening night, you won't be remembering words. You'll be remembering what your body did, and the words come with it, like a song you can't recall sitting still, but sing perfectly the second you start walking." It worked. For the first time in his life, 15-year-old Keanu found a way around the locked door instead of beating himself against it. He learned a 10-page scene that way, line by line, attached to crosses and gestures and feelings. And when he ran it for Walter, he did not stumble once, because he was not reading, he was remembering with his whole body. Walter watched him finish, and was quiet for a moment, and then said gruffly, "40 years I taught that trick to actors who didn't need it. Took me till I was 80 to teach it to one who did." And in the evenings, Keanu went home, out past the kitchen where Patricia slept before her shift, into the small detached garage at the back of the property that nobody had used for a car in years. That was where 15-year-old Keanu was building the thing nobody saw coming. It didn't look like much at first. A space heater that didn't quite work. A mattress on the floor, the scripts from the bins, drying out, flattening under stacked bricks. The rehearsal tapes, sorted now, lined up along a board shelf. But Keanu had started to do something with them that no one had told him to do. He had begun to keep a record. He found in one of the bins an old VHS camera, the bulky kind that sat on your shoulder, dead, its mechanism seized. It had cost too much to repair, so the Playhouse had thrown it out. Keanu took it home and spent 3 weeks on it, taking it apart on a towel on the garage floor, cleaning each part, learning what every piece did because no manual would hold still long enough for him to read it, so he learned it with his hands instead. When the tape mechanism finally turned over and the little red record light came on, 15-year-old Keanu sat back on the cold concrete and watched it run for a long time before he turned it off. Then he set it on a stack of bricks, pointed it at the bare wall, pressed record, and began to act. He did the speech from page 40. He did it badly. He did it again. He did it 40 times. Then he rewound the tape and watched himself, and he saw, with the merciless clarity of the camera, every false moment, every place he was performing instead of being, every second he was thinking about how he looked instead of what the man was hiding. He labeled the tape. Not by date at first, he came to that later. At first, just a number. 1. He put it on the shelf. By the time Keanu was 16, the shelf had 30 tapes on it. By 17, it had over 100. And he had started dating them, penciling the day onto the spine, the way Walter's notebook had taught him to keep a record of work. Because work you don't track is work you can't learn from. He sorted them. Monologues here, scene street work here, cold reads here, the camera running, while he picked up a page he'd never seen and tried to find the hidden thing on the first pass, failing, slowly, failing less. Keanu was building a library. Not of wood, not of anything anyone could price. A library of hours. Of 1,000 attempts at the one thing he wanted to learn, recorded and kept, stacked along a garage wall in a city that had already decided what he was. Patricia came out to the garage one morning before her shift. She stood in the doorway in her coat and looked at the shelf of tapes, the camera on its bricks, her 17-year-old son, sitting cross-legged on the cold floor, watching himself on a tiny screen. "Baby," she said, "what is all this?" Keanu looked up at her. "It's where I'm getting better," he said. She didn't understand. How could she? She saw a garage full of garbage and a boy who couldn't read talking to a wall. She saw the math of his future and it still didn't add up. But she also saw something on his face she hadn't seen in a long time, since before the schools and the verdicts and the soft voices, and she didn't have a name for it either. She didn't tell him to stop. She went to work. And behind her, in the cold garage, with the red light glowing, 17-year-old Keanu Reeves pressed record again. The years that followed were the kind that don't photograph well. There is no good footage of a person getting better at something slowly. There is no montage in real life, no music swelling under a sequence of small victories. There is just the same cold garage, the same shelf filling up one tape at a time, the same speech done badly, and then less badly, and then on rare nights, done in a way that made Keanu stop the tape and sit very still, because for 11 seconds he had stopped being a kid in a garage and had become someone else entirely, and he had felt it happen, and he wanted to know how to do it on purpose. Keanu turned 18. He turned 19. The shelf had over 400 tapes on it. To the people around him, 18-year-old Keanu was still a punchline. That was the thing about a long, quiet project that nobody understands. It doesn't earn you respect while you're doing it. It earns you exactly the opposite. The neighbors saw a young man who'd left school, who didn't have a real job, who spent his nights in a garage doing God knew what with a camera. There were words for a person like that, and none of them were kind. There was a guy named Trevor Sutton, who lived 3 streets over and drove a gray pickup he'd put too much money into. Trevor was 20, the kind of guy who peaks at 17 and spends the rest of his life slightly confused about why it isn't working anymore. One morning at the bus stop, Trevor leaned out the window of the pickup and called across the street. Hey, it's the movie star. You famous yet? You performing for the lawnmower out there?" He laughed at his own joke, the way Trevor always did, getting there before anyone else could decline to join him. "My cousin says you talk to a camera in your garage like a psycho. That true?" 18-year-old Keanu pulled his hood a little lower and said nothing. "Yeah, that's what I figured," Trevor said, and the truck pulled away, and the laughter was already gone down the street before Keanu had decided not to answer it. Here is a thing worth sitting with for a second. Have you ever done something for a long time that you couldn't explain to anyone? That you couldn't even prove was worth doing? That looked from the outsides exactly like failure, and had to keep doing it anyway, on faith, with no evidence, while people you knew laughed at you for it? That's the part of these stories that nobody puts in the montage. Because it doesn't look like anything. It just looks like a kid being stubborn about garbage. Patricia worried in the tired way of a woman who has run out of room for new worries, and is just trying to manage the old ones. "You can't make a living talking to a camera in a garage, baby?" she said one night, not unkindly, standing at the door in her coat with her keys already in her hand. "I'm not saying stop. I'm saying there has to be a plan. There has to be something real at the end of this." 18-year-old Keanu looked at his mother for a long moment. "Be patient, Mom," he said. "I'm not finished." It was the first time in his life Keanu had ever told his mother to be patient. The words surprised them both. Patricia stood there a second longer, something working behind her tired eyes, and then she left for her shift without saying anything else. Because there was nothing to say to a thing like that, except wait and see, and waiting was the one thing she knew how to do. Keanu went out to the garage and pressed record. Walter was one who finally pushed Keanu toward the audition. There was a conversation first, One Keanu would remember for the rest of his life. It was late, the playhouse empty, the work light off, just the two of them sitting in the dark house among the empty seats. 19-year-old Keanu had asked Walter something he'd been wanting to ask for a long time and had never had the nerve. He asked Walter if it had been worth it, the whole life, given how it ended, with the sweeping and the green room and the industry that didn't return his calls. He asked it carefully because he was afraid of the answer, afraid that the old man would say no, and that the no would tell Key something terrible about his own road ahead. Walter was quiet for a while. "Worth it?" Walter finally said, turning the frif over. "You're asking the wrong question. You're asking whether it was worth it because of how it turned out, whether the ending justifies it. That's the world's question. The world only knows how to measure a thing by where it ended up." He shook his head slowly in the dark. "I'll tell you the truth. I stood on a stage and became another man and made 400 strangers hold their breath at the same time. That happened. It happened whether or not anyone remembers it happened. The remembering was never the thing. The doing was They can forget me all they like. They cannot reach back into 1961 and take away the night I was good. That night is mine. It is still mine. It will be mine after I'm gone." 19-year-old Keanu sat with that. "That's why you keep the tapes," Walter said. It was not a question. He had never been to the garage, but he understood Keanu completely. "You think you're keeping them to study. You are. But that's not really why. You're keeping them because each one is a night you did the work, and you will not let the world tell you those nights didn't count just because no one was watching. Good. Keep doing that. Keep everyone. The work is real the moment you do it. Everything after is just other people slowly finding out." It was the most Walter had ever said at once. He seemed almost embarrassed by it. He cleared his throat and changed the subject, and that was when he told Keanu about the open call. By then, Keanu was 19, and Walter was a frail 80. His hands shaking when he held the script, his memory starting to drop stitches here and there. But his eye was as sharp as ever, and his eye told him that Keanu was ready, or as ready as raw talent gets before it meets the wall of the actual industry. "There's an open call," Walter said. "A casting director named Gerald Mercer is putting together a roster for a couple of CBC things, some commercial work, the usual. He sees a lot of people. You should go." 19-year-old Keanu looked uncertain. "I can't read cold. If they hand me a page." "Then you tell them you'd like a minute with it. You hear it in your head the way I taught you. You attach it. And then you don't read it, you do it." Walter put his shaking hand on Keanu's shoulder. "Listen to me. This man, Mercer, he is going to look at you for about 10 seconds and think he already knows what you are. That's what they do. That's the whole game on their side of the table. Don't let his 10 seconds become your verdict. You understand me? His 10 seconds are about him. They were never about you. Let me tell you about Gerald Mercer, because you're going to want to understand exactly who was sitting behind that table." Gerald was in his late 30s then, and he had built a small reputation on a single talent, or what he believed was a talent. He could, he said, tell within seconds whether someone had it. The instrument, he called it. You either had the instrument or you didn't, and Gerald could hear the first note and know. He'd been right enough times to believe it completely, which is the most dangerous amount of right a person can be. He had a way of leaning back in his chair when someone walked in, looking them up and down once, and you could see the verdict land before they'd open their mouth. Type. Look. Instrument or no instrument. Next. It was efficient. It was also, though Gerald would never have accepted the word, a kind of blindness dressed up as vision. Because what Gerald's 10-second eye was actually reading was not talent. It was familiarity. It recognized the things that looked like what success had looked like before. A confident jaw, an easy charm, a face that fit the shape of the parts that were being written. And it filtered out, every single day, the people who didn't yet look like anything the industry had already approved. There is a real thing here, worth knowing, about how casting actually works. A casting director sees hundreds, sometimes thousands of people for a single project. To survive that volume, they develop shortcuts, snap judgments, a sorting instinct that runs faster than conscious thought. Most of it is type, the quick read of whether a person matches the pre-imagined shape of a role. It is necessary. It is also how a great deal of real talent gets cut in the first 10 seconds before anyone has seen what the person can actually do. Because what they can do takes longer than 10 seconds to show, and the room does not have longer than 10 seconds to give. 19-year-old Keanu went to the open call on a Thursday. He sat in a hallway with 40 other young men, most of them the confident jaw type, the easy charm type, and he felt every inch of the gap between him and them. They chatted. They had headshots in nice folders. Keanu had a single photograph Walter had taken of him on the stage under the work light, and no folder. When Keanu's name was called, he went in. The room was small and overlit with fluorescence. Gerald Mercer sat behind a folding table with a younger man beside him running the camera, a quiet 22-year-old named Daniel Reyes, whose job was to keep the tape rolling and his mouth shut. Gerald didn't look up at first. He was making a note about the previous person. Then Gerald looked up, and 19-year-old Keanu watched it happen, the thing Walter had warned him about. He watched Gerald Mercer's eyes do the 10-second sweep. Hair too long, stance too still, almost slouched. No folder, no easy smile. Doesn't fit anything we're casting. Name? Gerald said, already half looking back at his notes. Keanu told him, "You have something prepared or you want to read? I'd like a minute with the page, if that's okay. Then I'd rather do it than read it." Gerald's pen paused. Something flickered across his face, a small impatience. He had 40 more after this one. "We don't really have time for. Just read it. Top of the scene." He slid a page across the table. "Whenever you're ready." Keanu looked at the page. The letters slid. He could have explained. He could have said the words dyslexia, processing, give me a moment. But he was 19, and the panic was old and fast, and the fluorescents were humming. And the man behind the table was already looking at his watch. And so Keanu did the only thing he could do. He tried to read it cold. It came out the way it always came out. Broken. He stumbled on the second line, went back, lost it. "Okay," Gerald said, not unkindly, which was almost worse than unkind. "Okay, thank you. We'll be in touch. 10 seconds. Maybe 12. Keanu stood there for one more moment. He thought about Walter, about the work light, about the 400 tapes. He thought about saying something. "Let me do it without the page. I know how to do this. Just give me the scene, not the words." But Gerald was already looking past him to the door. "Next, please." Keanu left. In the corner, the young man running the camera, 22-year-old Daniel Reyes, watched him go. And Daniel, who had no power in that room and knew it, had seen something in the half-second before the kids started reading. The way Keanu had gone still and taken in the page. The way his eyes had moved when he'd glanced up at Gerald, reading him, clocking something. Daniel had been in that chair for 8 months watching. Gerald cut people in 10 seconds. And most of the time, Daniel thought Gerald was right. But every so often, someone walked out that door, and Daniel had the uncomfortable feeling that a mistake had just been filed as a judgment. He had that feeling now. He didn't say anything. He was 22, and the tape had to keep rolling, and Gerald Mercer signed off on his pay. He kept his mouth shut. "That one couldn't read his way out of a cereal box," Gerald said, making a note. "No instrument. Next." 19-year-old Keanu walked home in the cold. He did not cry, because he used up that particular response a long time ago on smaller things. He just walked, and the city went by, gray and indifferent, and somewhere in the walking he made a decision that he could not have articulated, but that would shape the entire rest of his life. He decided that Gerald Mercer's 10 seconds were not going to be his verdict. Walter had told him, "His 10 seconds are about him. They were never about you." Keanu had not fully believed it in the room. He believed it now, on the cold walk home, in the specific way you come to believe a hard thing. Not because someone told you, but because you have just lived the exact moment they warned you about and found out they were right. Keanu went home. He went out to the garage. He pointed the camera at the wall, and he did the scene from the audition, the one he had failed to read. He had it now, every word, because Daniel Reyes was not the only one who could hear a thing once and keep it. He did it the way he would have done it if Gerald had given him the minute. He found the hidden thing in the man in the scene. He played it true. He did it 11 times, and the 11th time he stopped the tape and sat back on the cold concrete and knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with anyone else's opinion, that it had been good. Nobody saw it. That was the whole point and the whole pain of it. Nobody saw it but Keanu. He labeled the tape. He dated it. He put it on the shelf. The work waits, Walter always says. Keep the work. The work waits. Walter Holloway died that winter. It was not dramatic. He was 80, and the cold got into his chest. And one morning the board member who came to open the playhouse found him in the green room where they let him sleep. Gone his sleep. The green cardigan still on. A script open on his chest. 19-year-old Keanu found out 2 days later. He had been coming by less, working more, trying to find the something real his mother kept asking about. He came to the playhouse and Sharon Pritchard, the manager, the one who'd told him years ago to take whatever he wanted from the bins, met him at the door with a face that told him before she said anything. She gave Keanu a box. "He left this for you," she said. "Had your name on it. Don't ask me when he did it. Could have been years ago, knowing Walter." Keanu took the box home. He didn't open it that night. He couldn't. He sat with it in the garage, in the cold, with the camera dark for once, and just held the box on his knees. He thought about the first afternoon, the alley, you planning to pay for those. He thought about the work light and the sloped stage, and the way Walter had been the first person in his entire life to look at him for longer than 10 seconds and find something worth the looking. He thought about how the world had thrown Walter away, too, the same way it threw away the scripts and the tapes. A man who had given his whole life to learning something true and had been filed under no longer relevant and forgotten while he was still alive to know it. There was a particular cruelty in that, Keanu thought, sitting in the cold. The world did not even have the decency to wait until Walter was gone to forget him. It had done it to his face over years, while he swept the stage he was once good enough to stand on. And yet Walter had not become bitter. That was the thing 19-year-old Keanu could not get over. A bitter man would have looked at a stumbling kid in an alley and seen nothing, or worse, seen a chance to feel superior. Walter had looked at him and seen the one student in 40 years worth giving everything to. The forgetting had not been able to reach the part of Walter that mattered. He had kept it whole, kept it true, and then he had handed it to a boy nobody expected anything from, because that was the only way left to keep it alive. When Keanu finally opened the box, the next day, he found Walter Holloway's entire life inside. The scripts from 40 years of work, annotated in that careful hand, every part Walter had ever played, the famous ones and the forgotten ones, the triumphs and the seasons nobody remembered. A photograph of a young Walter, impossibly handsome, in costume, lit like he was the most important person in the world, which for 1 decade he nearly had been. And on top of it all, a single sheet of paper, a note, in a hand that shook more than the notebooks had, written recently, written knowing, "I don't have anyone to leave the work to. The industry forgot me, which I have made my peace with mostly. But I will not let it forget what I knew, because I gave my whole life to learning it, and it was true. Don't wait for them to see it. They are slow, and they are scared, and they look for 10 seconds and call it judgment. You cannot make them see. So don't try. Keep the work. The work waits. It outlasts every man who ever looked at it for 10 seconds and called it nothing. You already know how to see what a man is hiding. Now go let them find out in their own time that they were wrong about you. You won't have to say a word. Just keep the work." 19-year-old Keanu read the note many times. Then he put it in the box, and he put the box on the shelf next to the 400 tapes, and he went out into the cold winter city, and he did not stop. Keanu took whatever work would have him. Background, a line here, a line there. A regional commercial. A student film that paid nothing. He was not above any of it because Walter had taught him that there is no such thing as a small part to a person who is still learning. Only small actors who think they are above the lesson. There was a day when Keanu was 21, on a commercial shoot, a forgettable thing for a furniture chain, where he had been hired as background. A man reading a newspaper in the corner of a living room, while the real actors said the real lines about sofa prices. Between takes, the director, a harried man on a tight schedule, had glanced over and noticed something. The background guy with the newspaper wasn't just sitting there waiting for action. He was being a man who was reading a newspaper, a man with a whole interior life, slightly bored, half listening, present in a way the paid actors in the foreground were not. The director watched him for a second longer than he meant to. Then he did something he never did. He gave the background guy a line. Just one. An improvised aside. Something about the weather. Keanu delivered it so naturally that it stayed in the final cut, and the director thought about him for a week afterward and couldn't say why. That was how it went for Keanu through his early 20s. Not a breakthrough. A series of small moments where someone looked at him for longer than 10 seconds and could not look away, and could not explain it, and remembered him later. The camera was starting to do the thing with him that Robin Caldwell would describe years later. The thing nobody could name. He kept the camera running at home. He kept the shelf growing. He attached every part to a feeling and a movement so his body would remember what the page could not hold. And slowly, in a way no single day could show, Keanu got better. It took years. Of course it took years. It always takes years, and the years are the part the world never sees and never credits, the long, dark middle, where you are doing the quiet thing on faith, and everyone who knows you has quietly concluded that you are wasting your life. Somewhere in those years, between 21 and 29, the gap began to close. Not because the industry came to see Keanu, because the work, kept long enough, became undeniable on its own terms. A casting assistant remembered him from a commercial. A director on a small project found that the quiet young man with the strange stillness did something on camera that the camera loved, something the confident jaw types couldn't do, something you couldn't fake and couldn't teach and could only build, one tape at a time in a cold garage. Over years, nobody was watching. The work was starting to weight less. And several years away from that fluorescent lit room, Gerald Mercer's career was about to need exactly the thing Gerald Mercer had cut in 10 seconds. The film came together the way these things do, which is to say slowly and then all at once. By now, Keanu Reeves was 29. It was a real film with a real budget, the kind of production that doesn't come along often and can remake or end a career, depending on how it lands. The director was a 48-year-old woman named Pamela Grier, who had built her reputation on small, true, human films and was now being trusted with something larger. She had a specific problem. The lead role was a quiet man, a man who carried something he could not say, a man whose whole performance had to live in what he was hiding rather than what he said. The script gave him very few words. Everything had to be underneath. Pamela had seen 40 actors for it. The confident ones were too confident. The charming ones were too charming. They kept performing the man's pain instead of hiding it, which was the opposite of what the part needed. She was getting worried. There is a kind of role that exposes actors, that strips away every trick, because it gives them nothing to do but be. And most actors, turns out, do not know how to simply be on camera. They know how to perform being. The two things look nothing alike once you know how to tell them apart. And Pamela Grier knew how to tell them apart, which was exactly her problem, because it meant she could not unsee the falseness once she'd seen it, and she had seen it 40 times. And Gerald Mercer was the casting director. You should understand where Gerald was by now. The years had not been kind to the 10-second eye. The thing about building your whole identity on a single instinct is that the world eventually changes shape, and your instinct, tuned to the old shape, starts being wrong more often than it's right. Gerald had missed on a few high-profile calls. He had passed on people who'd gone on to do well elsewhere. His reputation had a hairline crack in it that was slowly spreading, and he knew it, and the knowing made him grip the old instinct tighter rather than question it. The way a man who senses he is losing his footing holds harder to the rail. This film was Gerald's chance to prove the crack wasn't there. He needed a hit. He needed to find Pamela Grier, the impossible quiet man, and be the one who'd found him. The name came to Gerald from a producer, the 50-year-old Robin Caldwell. "There's someone you should see for this," Robin said. "He's been doing good work, quietly, for years, smaller things. But everyone who works with him says the same thing. The camera does something with him it doesn't do with other people. He doesn't push. He just is. People can't stop watching him, and they can't tell you why." Gerald looked at the single sheet of paper Robin slid across the glass table into a casting office, the late morning sun coming clean through the tall windows. The name on the page was Keanu Reeves, and Gerald laughed. "Him? I cut this guy in 10 seconds. Years ago. No instrument. Nothing there." He set the page down and slid it back. "Some people read for the camera, and the camera just looks right past them. That was him. Believe me, I have an eye for this. It's the one thing I've never been wrong about." Robin Caldwell, who had been in this business long enough to recognize the sound of a man defending something that was already lost, did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the page. She looked at the door to the waiting room, where the 29-year-old Keanu was sitting, having been called in by her. Not by Gerald, because she had learned to trust the people who worked with an actor over the man who'd looked at him for 10 seconds a decade ago. "He's here," Robin said. "I asked him to come in. Pamela wants to see him on camera before we decide anything." She paused. "Humor me. Roll one scene. If you're right, and we've lost 10 minutes. Gerald's jaw tightened. But Pamela Greer wanted it, and Pamela Greer was the director, and Gerald needed this film more than he needed to be right in this exact moment. So he made a small, tight gesture that meant fine, and Robin went to the door and brought Keanu in. In the waiting room, 29-year-old Keanu had been sitting quietly for 20 minutes, the way he had learned to wait a long time ago, without fidgeting, without performing patience, just present. He had not known when Robin called him in for the meeting, whose office this would be. He had learned the name only when he arrived and saw it on the door. Mercer. Keanu had sat with that for a moment, the way you sit with a name from a part of your life you have walked a long way from. He felt no anger. That surprised him a little, the absence of it. He had expected the old room to come back, the fluorescent hum, the 10 seconds, the next please. But it did not come back as a wound. It came back as a fact, the way a scar is a fact, something that happened to a person you used to be. He thought about getting up and leaving. He thought about saying nothing and just doing the work. He chose the work. Keanu had always chosen the work. It was the only choice he'd ever fully trusted. He was 29 now, of course. The dark hair had a little gray in it at the temples. The stillness that had read as a slouch to a younger Gerald had become something with age, something settled, a quality of being completely present without needing to announce it. He wore a plain charcoal jacket. He carried no folder. After all these years, Keanu still carried no folder, and there was something almost funny about that, if you knew the whole story, which Gerald did not. Gerald looked at the 29-year-old in front of him. And for 1 second, something moved at the back of Gerald's memory, a flicker, a half of recognition, gone before he could catch it. He did not place the face. Why would he? He had looked at it for 10 seconds a decade ago, and filed it under no instrument and never opened the file again. People do not remember the faces they have decided don't matter. That is the whole mechanism of the thing. The forgetting is the point. "All right," Gerald said, businesslike. "We're going to do a scene from the film. The characters doesn't say much. Daniel will give you the other lines." He gestured to the camera operator. And yes, it was the same Daniel Reyes. Older now, too, in his 30s, who had run the camera in the fluorescent room all those years ago and had kept his mouth shut while a kid walked out the door. Daniel was a full director of photography on other projects now, but still ran camera for Gerald on casting sessions sometimes, out of loyalty or habit, or the slow inertia of a working relationship. "Here's the page." Keanu took the page. He looked at it for a moment. The old slide of the letters was still there, would always be there, the locked door that had shaped his entire life. But Keanu was not 19 anymore. He did not panic. He looked up calmly and said, "Could I have a minute with it? I'd rather do it than read it." It was the same sentence. The exact same sentence 29-year-old Keanu had said in the fluorescent room a decade ago when he was 19. Gerald did not recognize it because Gerald had not been listening then either. But Daniel Reyes, behind the camera, went very still. Daniel remembered. The instant he heard the sentence, the memory came back whole. The kid with no folder, the broken cold read, the way he'd gone out the door while Gerald said couldn't read his way out of a cereal box. Daniel looked at Keanu's face, really looked, and the years fell away, and he knew. It was him, the kid from the fluorescent room. He'd gotten better, he'd gotten older, he'd built whatever you have to build to stand here this calm, but it was him. Daniel said nothing. But his hands were steady on the camera in a new way, the way your hands get steady when you understand that you are about to record something that matters. Take your minute, Rawson said, before Gerald could object. Keanu took his minute. He did not read the page so much as listen to it, his lips moving slightly, attaching, the way Walter had taught him in a cold theater under a single light a lifetime ago, when Keanu was 15. Then he set the page face down on the table. "Okay," Keanu said. "I'm ready." Daniel rolled, and Keanu did the scene as he barely spoke. The character had 4 lines in the whole scene, and Keanu threw none of them away, and he reached for none of them. He just stood there and let the thing the man was hiding live under his face, in his eyes, in the particular stillness of someone holding something too heavy to set down, and the room changed. The fluorescent hum, the folding chairs, the glass table, all of it fell away, and for 90 seconds there was only a man on a screen carrying something, and you could not look away from him. And you could not have told anyone why. It was the thing Pamela Greer had been looking for in 40 actors and had not found. It was the thing the confident Jaws and the easy charms could not do because it cannot be performed, only built. It was 1,000 tapes in a cold garage. It was 40 years of a forgotten man's notebook. It was the locked door that had forced 15-year-old Keanu to learn to read faces instead of pages until reading the hidden thing became the only language he was truly fluent in. Daniel held the shot. When it was over, nobody in the room said anything for a moment. Then Gerald Mercer cleared his throat. And here is where the story refuses to give you the easy ending. Because Gerald Mercer did not break down. He did not say I was wrong. He did not recognize the kid from the fluorescent room and dissolve into apology. That is not what men like Gerald do, and the truth is more interesting than the fantasy. What Gerald did was reframe. "Yeah," he said, slowly, recovering, reaching for the rail. "Yeah, see, this is what I've been saying. He's developed. The instrument was always there, it just needed time to. Look, not everyone's ready at 19. Some people you have to wait on. I've always been able to spot the ones worth waiting on." He nodded, convincing himself in real time. I had a feeling about him. Way back. You don't last in this business without an eye for the long game. Robin Caldwell looked at him. Daniel Reyes looked at his camera, and something at the corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, the exact expression an old actor named Walter Holloway used to make in an alley a lifetime ago. Though Daniel had never met Walter and had no way of knowing he was wearing a dead man's smile. 29-year-old Keanu said nothing at all. He did not say you cut me in 10 seconds. He did not say you said I couldn't read my way out of a cereal box. He did not say do you remember me. Keanu simply picked his page up off the table, turned it back over, and set it down squarely. The way you set down a tool when you are finished with it. Because Keanu didn't need Gerald to admit it. He had stopped needing that on a cold walk home a decade ago, when he was 19. Walter had been right. Gerald's 10 seconds had always been about Gerald. They had never been about Keanu. And a man who has truly learned that does not need the apology, because the apology was never the thing he was working toward. The work was the thing. The work had always been the thing. Keanu got the part. Of course, Keanu got the part. Pamela Greer watched the tape that evening in a small editing suite with the lights down, and she did not watch it the way you watch an audition, looking for reasons to say no. She watched it the way you watch a thing you have been searching for, and had begun to fear did not exist. She ran the 90 seconds twice, then a third time. On the third time, she stopped it on a single frame, Keanu's face in the middle of saying nothing. holding the thing the man could not say, and she looked at that frozen frame for a long while. She called Robin within the hour. "That's him," Pamela said. "That's the man. Where has he been?" "Doing the work," Robin said, quietly. "For years, where nobody was looking." "Well," Pamela said, "we're looking now." There was something Pamela said later, in an interview, that got at it better than anyone else managed. She was asked what made Keanu's performance work, and she thought about it and said, "Most actors show you the character's feelings. He showed me the character hiding them, and the hiding was the whole performance. You can't teach that. I've tried. It comes from somewhere a class can't reach. It comes from a person who spent a long time learning to read what people hide because for some reason they had to." She did not know how exactly right she was. She had never heard of a cold garage or a broken camera or an old man in a green cardigan. She just knew the truth of it when she saw it on a screen. Let me tell you where everyone landed, because real endings are never symmetric, and this one isn't either. Keanu Reeves went on. "You can imagine the rest or you can't, but it doesn't matter. Because the rest is the part the world eventually saw, and the world's seeing was never the point. What matters is that Keanu kept the camera in the garage long after he could afford better, and he kept the shelf of tapes, 400 and then more, dated in pencil, a library of the years nobody watched. Gerald Mercer got his hit. The film did well, and Gerald took a measure of credit for the casting, as casting directors do, and he told the story for years afterward of how he'd spotted the quiet young man and known he was worth waiting on, and the story got smoother every time he told it, until it bore almost no resemblance to the 10 seconds in the fluorescent room, which Gerald had genuinely, the point always had been. Because the forgetting was the point, and always had been. Gerald never learned the truth. Some people never do. They build a version of their own past they can live inside, and they live inside it, and they are not even lying, exactly, because they have made themselves believe it. Gerald went on having an eye for it. He was wrong about people in 10 seconds for the rest of his career, and he never once knew it. Daniel Reyes, the camera operator, the one who had stayed quiet in the fluorescent room and quiet again in the sunlit one, did not stay quiet about everything forever. He became a respected director of photography, and when young actors asked him for advice, which they did, he told them the same thing every time. He told them that he had watched a casting director cut a man in 10 seconds who turned out to be the best actor he would ever put on camera, and that the lesson was not about the actor. The lesson was about the 10 seconds. Never trust your own 10 seconds, Daniel told them. The 10 seconds is about you. It was never about them. Daniel did not know he was quoting a dead man named Walter Holloway. The good things people learn travel further than the names of the people who taught them. Trevor Sutton, who had leaned out of a gray pickup at a bus stop and called a stubborn teenager a psycho, never apologized. He saw Keanu's name years later, recognized it, and went very quiet about the whole thing. He told people he'd known Keanu growing up, but he didn't say what he'd said out the truck window. Some debts never get paid because the person who owes them cannot bear to look at the ledger. Patricia Bell, Keanu's mother, lived to see it. That was the one the universe got right. She lived to see her son stop being a boy talking to a wall in a cold garage and become a man people drove across cities to work with. There was a night after the film when Keanu brought Patricia to the room where he kept the tapes. She was 56 by then. She had never really looked at the tapes. For all the years they'd lived in the same house, the garage had been her son's strange country.
Right.
She left for the hospital before dark, and came home from after dawn too tired to visit. She had carried the worry about it the whole time, the worry of a mother doing the math of a son's future and not liking the numbers. And she had carried it alone, because there was no one to share it with and no time to put it down. Now 56-year-old Patricia stood in front of the shelf. 400 tapes, then more. Dated in pencil, going back to a year when Keanu was 15, and the whole world had already decided what he was. She ran her eyes along the spines, the numbers, the dates, the years of it, the sheer impossible patience of it. A thing done every single night with no evidence it would ever amount to anything, while she slept and worried, and went to work and came home and worried again. She put her rough hand flat on the shelf, the way you touch a thing you have finally understood. She didn't say much, because she was not a woman of many words, and the years had used up most of the ones she had. All those years, Patricia said. All those years, Keanu said. She left her hand on the tapes a long time. The closing scene is a small one, years on. Keanu is in his 30s now. He is in a quiet room, alone. There is a television and an old VHS player, the kind you can't buy anymore, kept working for one specific reason. Keanu slides a tape off the shelf, the same tapes, moved now to a better room, but kept all of them, every single one. The tape is labeled with a number and a date in faded pencil. 1. The first one. 15-year-old Keanu in the cold garage, doing the from page 40 badly for the first time. He puts it in. He watches. It is terrible. The Keanu on the screen is 15 and stiff and performing instead of being, and the cameras is not loving him yet. Not even a little. Keanu watches the whole thing. A younger man might have been embarrassed. He is not embarrassed. He watches the kid on the screen try, and fail, and try again, and he feels something toward that kid that does not have an easy name. Something between tenderness and gratitude, and a kind of grief for how alone the kid was, and how long he had to be alone. Keanu stops the tape. He sits for a moment. Then he reaches over and picks up a small book bound in cloth that was once dark green and is now the color of an old chalkboard, the spine long since gone, held together now with a rubber band. He opens Walter's notebook to the first page, the one that's been read so many times the pencil is almost gone, and he reads the line he could not read cleanly at 15, and can recite from memory now without looking. The camera doesn't read your lines. It reads what you're hiding. Keanu closes the book. Outside the window, the city goes on, indifferent as ever, full of rooms where people are doing quiet things that nobody is watching, on faith, with no evidence, while the world laughs or worse, while the world doesn't notice them at all. I keep coming back to the first tape. Not the audition, not the film, not the moment in the sunlit room when Gerald Mercer reframed his own blinks into foresight. The first tape. Number 1. 15-year-old Keanu Reeves alone in a cold garage, pointing a broken camera he'd fixed himself at a blank wall, doing a speech badly, and then keeping the evidence of how badly he'd done it. I keep thinking about why he kept that one. You'd think you'd throw out the first one, the worst one. The proof of how far you had to go. Keanu never did. He dated it and shelved it, and kept it for the rest of his life. And I think it's because he understood something most of us spend our whole lives refusing to understand. That the kid doing it badly, alone with nobody watching, is not the embarrassing prologue to the story. He is the whole story. Everything after was just the world slowly, grudgingly, catching up to a thing that was already true in that cold garage when no one was looking. Keanu didn't keep the tape to remember how far he'd come. He kept it to remember that he'd been right about himself before anyone agreed. That's the part I can't put down. While this story is fictional, the lessons about how often the world mistakes its own 10-second glance for the measure of a person are very real. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you'd like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter we're preparing for you.